Each exchange shapes the final verdict. Every camera uncovers reality, grasping your legal protections, enforcing true justice.
You military?
Yes, just got back from Iraq.
Got ID to prove that?
In my pocket.
Hands where I can see them.
Officer, you asked for my ID. I am reaching for it.
Hands where I can see them.
Officer Clinton Andrews had no idea what he just walked into. In 72 hours, the Pentagon would get involved. The Department of Justice would open a case, and Andrews would face charges carrying 55 years in federal prison. The quiet Marine on her knees. She had 3 combat tours, 2 Purple Hearts, a Silver Star for leading a rescue under enemy fire, and her entire arrest was being recorded. Before I continue, let me ask you something. Have you ever been treated unfairly by someone in power, especially as a woman of color? Drop your answer in the comments. Because if you think what happened next was wrong, hit that subscribe button and let me know where you're watching from. This story proves why accountability matters. But Officer Andrews had no idea who he just ordered to the ground. Sergeant Sarah Cooper was 29 years old. She joined the Marines right out of high school. She served her country for 11 years. She went to Iraq 3 times. She was not just any Marine. She was decorated. That means the military gave her awards for being brave. Her Silver Star came from one moment in combat. Her team was under attack. Bullets everywhere. 3 Marines were trapped in a collapsed building. Cooper ran into the gunfire. She pulled all 3 to safety. She also secured classified intelligence that saved dozens of operations. She saved their lives and protected national security. She also had 2 Purple Hearts. That means she was wounded in battle twice. Both times she healed and went back to fight. Her commanders loved her. They said she was calm under pressure. They wanted to make her staff sergeant. That is a big deal in the Marines. On this afternoon in late autumn, Cooper was not looking for trouble. She just finished a 9-month tour. She wore her dress uniform from the Welcome Home event that morning. She was driving to surprise her mother. 60 miles to go. She stopped for gas and coffee. Now, here is what happened next. Officer Clinton Andrews had a reputation in this county. It was not a good one. Andrews was 36 years old. He worked as a deputy sheriff for 8 years. On paper, he looked fine. In reality, there were problems. 5 people had filed complaints against him before this day. All 5 were black women. All 5 said he stopped them for no reason. All 5 cases were closed. The department said there was not enough proof. Nothing ever happened to Andrews. People in the black community knew his name, women especially. They told each other to be careful if they saw his patrol car. They knew he caused trouble. One time, he stopped a black woman driving home from a military reserve drill. He held her for 40 minutes. The reason, he said, her military decal looked fake. She showed him her military ID. He still made her wait while he ran checks that went nowhere. Another time, he called for backup on a black businesswoman at her own office. She was working late. Andrews said she looked suspicious entering the building. She owned the building. A third time, he accused a black female pastor of acting nervous during a traffic stop. The pastor was nervous because Andrews kept his hand on his weapon the entire time. There was no violation. He still searched her car. But there was something else in Andrews's file. Something buried deeper. 5 years earlier, a black female deputy filed a harassment complaint against him. Andrews made advances. She refused. He did not stop. When she reported him to a supervisor, Andrews became hostile. The complaint was investigated quietly. It was dismissed as a personality conflict. The deputy transferred to another precinct within 6 months. She left law enforcement entirely a year later. Andrews never forgot the rejection. He never forgot the humiliation of being reported. After that, his pattern of stops changed. He began targeting black women specifically. The complaints piled up. The department ignored them. Now Andrews was pulling into a gas station on a sunny afternoon. He saw a woman in a military uniform. The uniform was crisp, clean, covered in medals. The jacket had United States Marines embroidered clearly across the chest. But Andrews did not see a Marine. He saw a black woman, and in his mind, that uniform could not be real. Cooper stood at the pump. The nozzle clicked off. She replaced it, screwed the gas cap back on. The sun was warm. The drive home felt close now. Just 60 more miles. Her mother did not know she was coming. The surprise would be worth the long journey. Andrews stepped out of his patrol car. He walked toward her slowly. His hand rested near his belt. His eyes moved from her face to her uniform, then back again. Something in his expression hardened. He stopped 3 feet away, his voice carried across the lot. That uniform hers? Cooper turned. She had dealt with questions before. Curiosity, gratitude, confusion, sometimes. At seeing a woman in marine dress blues, she kept her tone polite. Her hands were visible at her sides. Yes, ma'am. She had just returned from deployment. Andrews did not relax. He asked if she had identification proving she was military. The question felt different, not curious, suspicious. Cooper nodded. Her military ID was in her jacket pocket. She started to reach for it. Andrews' hand moved to his weapon. Hands up. Do not reach for anything. Cooper froze. Training took over. Assess the threat. De-escalate. Survive. She raised her hand slowly, palms open. She spoke calmly. He had asked for her ID. It was in her pocket. She needed to retrieve it. Andrews did not move his hand from his weapon. Keep those hands where he could see them. His voice was sharp now, loud enough that people near the convenience store turned to look. A man in his 50s stood near the air pump. He wore a faded veteran's cap. He had been watching since Andrews approached. Now he stepped closer. He called out that the uniform was real. He had served. He knew what authentic service looked like. The medals were regulation. The insignia was correct. Andrews ignored him. Cooper's uniform told her entire story. The silver star, positioned above her ribbon rack. 2 purple hearts, proof of wounds earned in Fallujah and Ramadi. The Iraq Campaign Medal. The National Defense Service Medal. The Global War on Terrorism Service Medal. All authentic. All earned. All visible. Andrews saw none of it, or he saw it and decided it could not belong to her. He moved behind her. His hand was firm on his sidearm now. On her knees. Now. The pavement was hot, gritty with oil stains and tracked-in dirt. Cooper lowered herself slowly. Her dress uniform pressed into the filth. She kept her hands raised. Her breathing stayed steady. This was wrong. She knew it was wrong, but resistance would escalate. Training told her to comply, document, survive. The veteran near the air pump was shouting now, telling Andrews to look at her medals. Look at the silver star. Look at the ribbons. She was the real deal. Why was he doing this? A woman at the next pump pulled out her phone. She pointed it toward the scene. Started recording. A teenager near the convenience store did the same. Andrews ignored all of them. He pulled Cooper's wrists behind her back. The handcuffs clicked shut, tight enough to hurt. He announced she was under arrest for impersonating a member of the armed forces. Cooper's voice stayed calm. She asked him to check her dog tags. They hung around her neck, visible beneath her collar. Standard issue. Serial number. Blood type. Religious preference. Andrews told her to stop talking. She asked him to look at her deployment papers. They were in her jacket pocket, right next to her military ID, stamped orders from Marine Corps Base Camp Lejeune, dated 3 weeks ago. He did not check. He pulled her to her feet without looking at anything. The crowd around the gas station had grown. More phones pointed in their direction. Voices overlapped, angry, disbelieving, confused. The veteran in the cap was on his phone now, calling someone. His face was red. He kept repeating the same thing. She was real. The uniform was real. Why was nobody listening? Andrews walked Cooper toward his patrol car. She moved carefully. Her wrists ached where the cuffs bit into skin, but her mind was clear. Badge number. Time on the gas station clock. Faces of witnesses. License plate of the patrol car. She had survived ambushes in Anbar province by staying calm, by processing information under pressure, By not panicking, this was her own country, her own uniform, her own people watching her forced into the back of a police car, but the survival instinct was the same. The drive to the station took 11 minutes. Andrews said nothing. Cooper sat in the back seat, her mind drifting despite her focus. 3 tours: Fallujah, Ramadi, Baghdad. 247 days in combat zones. 17 firefights. 4 IEDs close enough to leave her ears ringing for days afterward. The Silver Star mission had been the worst and the best. Her unit pinned down. 3 Marines trapped when a building collapsed during a firefight, enemy fire coming from 3 directions. Cooper led the extraction herself. She went into that building twice, pulled 2 Marines out the first time, went back for the third while bullets tore through the walls around her. She also grabbed 2 laptops and a stack of documents that intelligence officers later said disrupted insurgent operations across 3 provinces. Her commanding officer called it the bravest thing he had seen in 23 years of service. The citation was classified because of the intelligence component, but the Silver Star was real, pinned to her chest, visible to anyone who looked. Andrews had not looked. Now Cooper sat cuffed in a patrol car, accused of pretending to be what she was. The sheriff's station was a low brick building surrounded by patrol cars. Andrews pulled into the side lot, walked her through a side entrance. The booking area was bright with fluorescent lights, sterile. A desk sergeant looked up from paperwork. Her eyes moved from Cooper's face to her uniform to the handcuffs. Sergeant Elena Vargas was 41 years old, former Army, 2 deployments to Afghanistan, medically retired after an IED left her with permanent hearing loss in her left ear. She had been in law enforcement for 6 years since. She knew what real uniforms looked like. She knew what real service meant. She had lived it. Vargas stood from her desk. Her voice was sharp. What was the charge? Andrews repeated it. Impersonating a military member. Vargas walked around the desk. She looked at Cooper's uniform up close. Close enough to see the stitching, the wear patterns, the way the ribbons were aligned in perfect rows. She looked at the name tape. Cooper. She looked at the dog tags hanging at her collar. She turned to Andrews. Had he verified identification? Andrews said the suspect refused to provide it. Vargas looked directly at Cooper. Did she have military identification? Cooper's voice was steady. In her left jacket pocket, along with her deployment orders. Vargas reached into the pocket carefully. She pulled out a military ID card. It had a holographic seal, updated within the last year. The photo matched Cooper's face exactly. She pulled out the deployment orders next. Official letterhead, signed by a colonel, dated 3 weeks prior. Orders sending Sergeant Sarah Cooper home on post-deployment leave after completing 9 months in Iraq. Vargas set the documents on her desk. She picked up the phone. Dialed. The call went to Camp Lejeune. Vargas identified herself, gave Cooper's name and serial number. Waited. The response came within 2 minutes. Sergeant Sarah Cooper. Active duty. Exemplary service record. 3 combat deployments. Decorated for valor. Recommended for promotion to staff sergeant. Currently on authorized leave. 0 disciplinary actions on file. Vargas hung up. She unlocked the handcuffs without asking Andrews for permission. She handed Cooper her ID and her orders. Her expression was tight, controlled anger. She turned to Andrews. Her voice carried across the booking area, loud enough that 2 other officers in the hallway stopped to listen. There was no crime here. The uniform was real. The medals were real. The service was real. This arrest should never have happened. Andrews started to respond. Vargas cut him off. File your report and leave the room. As Andrews walked toward the hallway, whispers started. The other officers knew. This was not the first time. There had been complaints before, 5 of them, all black women, all dismissed. But people remembered. People talked. Cooper stood near the booking desk. She rubbed her wrists where the cuffs had pressed too tight. Red marks crossed her skin. The station was cold with air conditioning, but she felt colder inside. Vargas was back on the phone, notifying someone higher up. following procedure, protecting herself, probably, but also doing the right thing. Cooper's homecoming had been 60 miles away. A surprise for her mother. Dinner around the kitchen table. Stories about deployment. Laughter. Relief that she was home safe. Now she stood in a sheriff's station booking area, her uniform dirty from kneeling on pavement, her wrists marked from handcuffs, her dignity stripped in front of strangers with cameras. Vargas finished her call. She turned back to Cooper. She apologized. It would not undo what happened. But it mattered that someone said it. Cooper nodded. Asked if she could leave. Vargas said yes. But she warned her. This was not over. Those cameras at the gas station, the witnesses, the phone recordings, the moment it happened, it became bigger than a bad stop. It became something that would reach beyond this county. Cooper picked up her cover from the desk where Andrews had tossed it. She walked out the front entrance this time, into the afternoon sun. Her uniform was still mostly clean despite everything. The metals still caught the light. Behind her, the station was already making calls. Within hours, the story would reach her command. By morning, it would reach further than anyone expected. Cooper drove home, 60 miles through farm country and small towns. Her mother opened the door, saw her face, and knew immediately something was wrong. Over dinner, Cooper told the story. Calmly, factually, the gas station, the arrest, the handcuffs. Her mother cried. Her father, a Vietnam veteran, sat silent. He had warned her years ago that the uniform would not protect her from everything. But he had hoped. They had all hoped. That night, the gas station videos started spreading online. By morning, the world would be watching. The first call reached Camp Lejeune at 1700 hours. A duty officer took the report, read it twice, and flagged it immediately. By 1830, a colonel was reviewing the incident summary. By 1900, Marine Corps headquarters in Quantico had been notified. The notification protocol was standard for any active duty service member detained by civilian law enforcement, but this case carried complications. Sergeant Sarah Cooper was not just active duty. Her service record included a Silver Star with a partially classified citation. The mission details were sealed at a national security level. The summary was clear enough, though: combat rescue in Fallujah, 3 Marines extracted under fire, intelligence assets secured, critical operational value. When the Pentagon received the briefing at 2200 hours, the response was immediate. Any incident involving a service member with classified commendations required federal review. By midnight, Department of Justice officials were reading the preliminary report. The gas station footage arrived at the DOJ field office early the next morning. Federal agents reviewed it without comment. The video was unambiguous. Cooper in full dress uniform, medals clearly visible. Andrews approaching with his hand near his weapon, Cooper's calm attempts to comply, her explanation, her offer to provide identification, Andrews forcing her to the ground despite visible evidence. The veteran intervening verbally, the phones recording from multiple angles. One agent replayed the moment Andrews handcuffed her. The Silver Star was in frame. Unmistakable. They pulled Andrews' personnel file next. 8 years with the county sheriff's department. 5 prior complaints. All filed by black women. All closed without discipline or consequence. The pattern was documented but had never triggered action. The investigation expanded. Agents contacted the 5 complainants. 3 agreed to be interviewed. Their accounts shared common elements: unwarranted stops, aggressive questioning without cause, implied threats, prolonged detentions that led nowhere. One case stood out. A black woman, also a military veteran, stopped 2 years earlier while driving home from a reserve drill weekend. Andrews detained her for 40 minutes, questioning the authenticity of her military decal despite valid identification. He ran multiple checks, found nothing, released her without explanation or apology. Then investigators found the buried complaint, 5 years old, filed by a black female deputy who had worked in the same department. The report described persistent, unwanted advances from Andrews. She refused repeatedly. He did not stop. When she escalated the complaint to a supervisor, Andrews became openly hostile, made her work environment unbearable. The complaint was investigated internally, classified as a personality conflict, and dismissed. The deputy transferred within 6 months, left law enforcement entirely within a year. Federal agents tracked her down. She agreed to an interview, confirmed every detail. Andrews had not simply been rejected romantically. He had been rejected publicly, reported officially, humiliated in a way that damaged his ego. The complaint had been buried, but Andrews never forgot. His pattern of targeting black women in traffic stops began shortly after. The vendetta had roots. Personal resentment that metastasized into professional abuse. The gas station arrest was not random. It was years of unchecked bias crystallized into one moment. While federal investigators worked methodically, the gas station videos were spreading exponentially online. The first upload hit social media 6 hours after the arrest. By the next morning, 8 million views. By afternoon, 30 million. By evening, the number exceeded 50 million across platforms. The hashtag formed, without coordination, Justice for Cooper. It trended simultaneously on multiple platforms. Women's veteran organizations shared the video with statements condemning the treatment. Civil rights groups issued calls for immediate prosecution. Celebrities with military backgrounds amplified the story. A retired Marine general tweeted that Cooper represented everything honorable about service and Andrews represented everything broken about accountability. The video was visceral. A decorated combat veteran treated like a criminal for wearing the uniform she earned. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Cooper's calm professionalism against Andrews' aggression, her visible medals against his refusal to see them, her service to the country against his abuse of power within it. National media outlets picked up the story within 24 hours. Cable news ran segments analyzing the footage frame by frame. International outlets followed. The BBC highlighted the intersection of military heroism and racial injustice. German media outlets ran features on systemic bias in American law enforcement. The story resonated globally because the injustice was so clear. Cooper had returned to her family home. Her mother watched the videos spreading online with tears streaming down her face. 9 months worrying about roadside bombs in Iraq. 9 months afraid of ambushes and firefights. And her daughter came home safe from war, only to be brutalized at a gas station 60 miles from home. Cooper's father, who had served in Vietnam, sat at the kitchen table in silence. He had warned his daughter years ago the uniform would not shield her from everything. Being black and being a woman meant certain realities persisted, regardless of service. But he had hoped things were better now. The arrest proved they were not. Online, the response built like a wave gaining momentum. Veterans shared their own stories, being questioned about their service, being accused of stolen valor, being stopped and searched despite credentials. Black service members described the compounded weight. Racism layered with the assumption that their achievements were fraudulent. Women in uniform talked about being dismissed, harassed, treated as anomalies rather than equals. Cooper's case had clear evidence, video from multiple angles, an exemplary service record, federal involvement, but the responses online revealed how many others faced similar treatment without cameras, without medals impressive enough to force accountability, without viral attention to demand justice. The Pentagon issued a statement 72 hours after the arrest. Unequivocal condemnation, full support for Sergeant Cooper, complete cooperation with federal authorities. The statement was signed by the Commandant of the Marine Corps himself. It was distributed to every military installation worldwide. The Department of Justice followed with formal charges: assault on a service member under federal statute, deprivation of rights under color of law, false imprisonment, official misconduct, and because of Andrews' documented pattern targeting black women, hate crime enhancements attached to every count. The charges were federal. The case would be prosecuted in a jurisdiction where local politics carried no influence. Andrews was arrested at his home 4 days after Cooper's detention. The symmetry was noted by everyone. He was handcuffed in his driveway, booked at a federal facility, held overnight. The bail hearing drew significant media coverage. Prosecutors argued Andrews was a demonstrated danger to the community based on his documented history. The judge agreed. Bail was set at $500,000. Andrews could not post it. He remained in custody pending trial. As Andrews sat in a federal holding cell, more information about Cooper emerged. Parts of her classified service record were declassified specifically for the prosecution. The Silver Star mission involved more than extracting trapped Marines. She had led her team into a compound under sustained enemy fire, pulled 3 Marines to safety. But she had also secured 2 laptops and multiple documents containing intelligence on insurgent networks. That intelligence disrupted planned attacks across 3 Iraqi provinces. It saved dozens of operations. The strategic value remained partially classified, but enough was revealed to demonstrate the scope of her contribution. Cooper was not just a decorated Marine. She was someone whose actions had altered outcomes at a national security level, and Andrews had treated her like a fraud at a gas station. The disconnect was staggering. It became the focal point of public discourse. How could systems allow someone like Andrews to remain in power for 8 years, while someone like Cooper was forced to her knees? Cooper declined most interview requests. She spoke briefly to a military publication, said only that she hoped the case would lead to meaningful reforms in how law enforcement interacted with service members. She did not express anger publicly. She expressed exhaustion. Her former commanding officer, now a lieutenant colonel, spoke on her behalf in multiple interviews. He described Cooper as one of the finest Marines he had served with in 23 years. Calm under pressure, courageous without recklessness, a leader who earned respect through competence, not rank. He said the arrest was an insult not just to Cooper but to every service member who had been doubted because of their race or gender. By the end of the first week, the case had become symbolic. Cooper had not sought attention. She had wanted to go home. But her arrest revealed fractures in systems that people preferred to ignore. Federal involvement meant those fractures could no longer be dismissed. The prosecution would proceed whether public attention remained or not. But the public was watching. Tens of millions of them. And they were not looking away. The federal courthouse was constructed from limestone and glass, a building designed to project authority without oppression. On the morning the trial began, the steps outside were crowded with protesters, journalists, and veterans standing in silent formation, wearing full-dress uniforms. Inside, the courtroom was filled to capacity. Prosecutors had successfully argued for federal jurisdiction to avoid local bias. The motion was granted. The judge assigned to the case was a former Air Force Judge Advocate General who had served 2 tours before law school. Her reputation was for precision. She valued evidence over theatrics. She tolerated neither. Officer Clinton Andrews sat at the defense table wearing a suit that looked uncomfortable on him. His attorneys were private counsel, funded by a police union legal defense fund. Their strategy centered on procedure. Andrews followed protocol. He had reasonable suspicion. The arrest was lawful, even if ultimately mistaken. Intent mattered. Malice had to be proven. The prosecution opened without preamble. They played the gas station security footage on courtroom monitors. No narration. No commentary. Just the video in full. The room watched in silence. Cooper at the pump in regulation dress uniform, Andrews approaching with his hand positioned near his weapon. The exchange, Cooper's hands rising, her body forced downward onto pavement, the handcuffs, the veteran pleading with Andrews to examine the medals, the phones recording from every angle. When the video ended, the lead prosecutor spoke. The evidence was not ambiguous. Sergeant Cooper wore full regulation uniform. Her medals were visible, authentic, properly positioned. Her demeanor was calm and cooperative. She offered identification. She explained her service clearly. She posed no conceivable threat. Officer Andrews arrested her for impersonating a military member despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. The defense countered immediately. Andrews could not verify uniform authenticity in the field. Stolen valor was a documented crime. Fake uniforms existed. He acted on legitimate law enforcement concern. The arrest was an error in judgment, not criminal malice. The prosecution called its first expert witness, a retired Marine gunnery sergeant with 28 years of service. He walked the jury systematically through military uniform regulations, construction standards, metal placement protocols, ribbon configurations, details that distinguished authentic service from imitation. He referenced the video repeatedly. The stitching on Cooper's jacket, the specific ribbon combinations, the wear patterns consistent with actual use. He stated unequivocally that anyone with basic military knowledge could identify Cooper's uniform as genuine. He noted that the words United States Marines were embroidered prominently across the chest. That detail alone should have resolved any doubt. Cross-examination attempted to undermine his testimony. Could a civilian law enforcement officer reasonably recognize all those details? The gunnery sergeant answered calmly. The prominent labeling was sufficient. The visible medals reinforced authenticity. Any remaining doubt could have been resolved by examining the identification Cooper offered to provide. The prosecution called Cooper to the stand next. She wore civilian clothes. Her bearing remained distinctly military. She recounted the arrest without embellishment. The questions from Andrews. His refusal to allow her to retrieve identification. The pavement against her knees. The handcuffs. She described her service record when questioned. 3 combat tours, 2 Purple Hearts from wounds sustained in separate engagements. The Silver Star. The prosecutor asked about the mission that earned the Silver Star. Cooper's voice remained level throughout. Her unit was conducting operations in Fallujah. They came under coordinated attack. 3 Marines were trapped in a building that partially collapsed during the firefight. Insurgents were targeting the location from multiple positions. Cooper led an extraction team into the structure under sustained fire. They pulled the trapped Marines out. Cooper also secured intelligence materials, laptops, and documents that later disrupted enemy operations across 3 provinces for months. The defense attorney cross-examined. Had Cooper considered that Officer Andrews might not have recognized her uniform as authentic? Cooper paused briefly. She had considered many things in that moment. The uniform had clear markings. The medals followed regulation standards. She offered her military identification. She explained calmly who she was. She had done everything a service member should do when questioned by law enforcement. The defense pressed further. Did Cooper believe her race played a role in the arrest? Cooper's response was measured. She could not speak to Officer Andrews' internal motivations. She could only describe what occurred. The prosecution called the veteran who witnessed the arrest at the gas station. He testified that he immediately recognized Cooper's uniform and medals as authentic. He approached Andrews specifically to confirm their legitimacy. Andrews ignored him completely. The defense suggested the witness was biased toward military personnel. The veteran replied that he was biased toward observable facts. The facts at that gas station were unambiguous. The prosecution entered Andrews' complete personnel file into evidence. 5 prior complaints. All dismissed without discipline. All filed by black women. Then they called the former deputy who had filed the sexual harassment complaint 5 years earlier. She testified about Andrews' persistent advances, his reaction to rejection, the hostile work environment that followed her refusal. She described transferring to another precinct to escape the situation. The prosecution then called 2 of the 5 civilians who had filed complaints against Andrews. Both testified about being stopped without legitimate cause, questioned aggressively, treated as suspects for existing in public spaces. Both were professional, credentialed, law-abiding. Both were black women. The pattern emerged through accumulation rather than argument. Andrews did not stop people randomly. He targeted specific demographics. When those people were black women, his suspicion intensified regardless of evidence. The defense attempted to reframe the pattern. Law enforcement officers make difficult judgment calls constantly, split-second decisions under pressure. The job requires healthy suspicion to ensure officer safety and public protection. Andrews acted in good faith based on his training and experience. The prosecution called an expert in implicit bias and law enforcement psychology. She testified about how personal grievances could manifest as professional behavior, how romantic rejection could calcify into racialized resentment, how power imbalances allowed unchecked bias to persist and intensify over time. She reviewed Andrews' documented history, the harassment complaint, the pattern of stops targeting black women specifically, the gas station arrest, The progression was consistent with someone whose personal animus had found institutional expression through authority. The defense objected repeatedly. Speculation, irrelevance, prejudicial testimony. The judge allowed it. The witness was qualified. The pattern was documented. The jury could assess its weight. The trial lasted 8 days. The prosecution presented 43 distinct pieces of evidence: video recordings, military service records, expert testimony on uniform regulations and implicit bias, witness statements, federal civil rights statutes. Each piece built systematically on the previous, constructing a case that transcended a single incident and demonstrated systematic abuse enabled by institutional indifference. The defense presented character witnesses for Andrews, fellow officers who described him as dedicated and professional. The prosecution did not attack their credibility directly. They simply asked whether those officers had witnessed Andrews interact with black civilians during stops. Most had not. Closing arguments were concise. The prosecution reminded the jury of the video. Cooper in full uniform, Andrews with his hand on his weapon, the unnecessary escalation, the documented pattern. The federal charges existed because local systems had failed to hold Andrews accountable for years. This case represented the consequence of that failure. The defense argued for reasonable doubt. Officers make mistakes. Intent matters under criminal law. Andrews believed he was acting correctly in the moment. That belief, even if ultimately wrong, should not result in federal conviction. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the courtroom fell silent. The foreperson stood, guilty on all counts: assault on a service member, deprivation of rights under color of law, false imprisonment, official misconduct, the hate crime enhancements attached, substantially increasing each potential sentence. Sentencing was scheduled 3 weeks later. When that date arrived, the courtroom was again filled. The judge reviewed the case, the evidence, the verdicts. Then she addressed Andrews directly. She acknowledged his years in law enforcement. She recognized the difficulty of the profession. Then she addressed his actions specifically. He had stopped a decorated combat veteran in full regulation uniform and treated her service as fraudulent. He ignored clear evidence. He dismissed credible witnesses. He acted not from reasonable suspicion, but from bias rooted in race and gender. His documented history demonstrated this was not isolated. It was pattern. Patterns required consequences commensurate with their scope and duration. She sentenced Andrews to 55 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. The sentence ranked among the harshest ever imposed for law enforcement misconduct in a civil rights case. It reflected not simply the gas station arrest, but years of unchecked behavior that preceded it. Andrews was remanded to custody immediately. His badge, career, and pension were forfeited. Media coverage intensified. Legal analysts debated whether the sentence was appropriate or excessive. Veteran organizations and civil rights groups issued statements supporting both the verdict and sentence. They argued that genuine accountability required real consequences, not symbolic gestures or administrative slaps. Cooper filed a civil lawsuit 2 months later. Named defendants included the county government and state law enforcement oversight bodies. Allegations included failure to supervise, failure to discipline despite documented complaints, and enabling a hostile environment for black civilians through institutional indifference. The case settled before reaching trial, $12.8 million, the largest such settlement in state history. The financial security was meaningful, but Cooper stated publicly that no monetary amount could repair the emotional damage. Being forced to the ground in the uniform she earned through sacrifice, being treated as a threat in the country she defended, those wounds did not close with settlement checks. Veteran organizations incorporated the case into training materials nationwide. Civil rights organizations cited it in reform proposals and legislative testimony. The video remained viral, a stark visual reminder of the gap between valor and respect, between service and safety, between uniform and skin. Cooper sat through all of it with the same composed bearing she demonstrated at the gas station. She had not sought attention or vindication through publicity. She sought accountability through process. and after years of others escaping consequences, accountability had finally materialized. The trial concluded, the sentence was imposed, the settlement was reached, but the work of repair extended far beyond courtrooms and financial compensation. 6 months after sentencing, Sergeant Sarah Cooper received a formal invitation to testify before the House Committee on Armed Services. The hearing was titled, Protecting Those Who Protect Us, Addressing Discrimination Against Service Members in Civilian Contexts. Cooper sat at the witness table wearing her dress uniform, medals aligned precisely, posture exact. The chamber was full. Representatives from both parties attended. Cameras lined the back wall, broadcasting live. This was not routine congressional oversight. This was public institutional reckoning. The committee chair opened with a detailed summary of Cooper's case. Then she invited Cooper to describe, in her own words, what occurred and what it meant beyond the immediate incident. Cooper's testimony was measured and precise. She recounted the gas station arrest factually. The details required no embellishment. But then she addressed the deeper psychological impact. She explained that the arrest had reopened wounds more profound than those sustained in combat. In Iraq, threats were identifiable. Training prepared her. She faced danger with her unit, with clear purpose, with institutional support. At that gas station, wearing the uniform she earned, she felt a powerlessness that combat never induced. She described the specific burden of being doubted not merely as a service member, but as a black woman in uniform, the compounded bias, the assumption that her achievements were inherently implausible, that her presence was fraudulent. She noted this experience was not unique to her. Thousands of black women served honorably. Many faced similar skepticism, harassment, and disrespect. Most incidents were never recorded, never prosecuted, never acknowledged. Then Cooper revealed additional details about her classified service record. With explicit clearance from the Department of Defense, she described the intelligence mission that earned her Silver Star. The rescue of trapped Marines was undeniably heroic, but the intelligence materials she secured under fire disrupted insurgent networks across multiple Iraqi provinces. They prevented attacks that would have killed dozens. That mission's classification level had been necessary for operational security at the time. Its declassification for this case revealed the absurd injustice of Andrews' actions. He arrested someone whose battlefield decisions had protected national security interests at the highest strategic levels. Cooper concluded her testimony with specific policy recommendations. She urged the committee to mandate verification protocols. When service members are detained, law enforcement should be required to confirm military status through official channels before proceeding with arrests. She called for explicit protections for female service members and service members of color who face compounded discrimination. She requested accountability mechanisms that functioned without requiring viral videos and federal intervention. The testimony lasted 41 minutes. When Cooper finished, the chamber remained quiet for several seconds. Then the ranking member, himself a Marine Corps veteran, thanked her for her service and issued a formal apology on behalf of systems that had failed her. The hearing generated immediate legislative momentum. The Veteran Equity Act was introduced 8 months later with strong bipartisan co-sponsorship. It mandated verification requirements when service members were detained. It required law enforcement agencies receiving federal funding to implement comprehensive training on military protocols and implicit bias recognition. It created a federal reporting system specifically for incidents involving service members detained by civilian authorities. Critically, it included provisions explicitly addressing discrimination against female veterans and veterans of color, acknowledging that their service often subjected them to unique, compounded vulnerabilities. The legislation passed both chambers within 14 months. It was signed into law at a ceremony attended by Cooper, her family, and representatives from veteran advocacy organizations. Cooper's arrest footage was simultaneously incorporated into law enforcement training programs nationwide. Police academies used it to teach de-escalation techniques, verification procedures, and the operational dangers of implicit bias. It became a standardized case study in how assumptions escalate into injustice when unchecked. The Pentagon updated its own protocols comprehensively, Service members were now briefed explicitly on their rights during civilian law enforcement encounters. Commands were required to respond immediately when notified of member detentions. Support networks were established, providing legal representation and psychological assistance. Veteran organizations launched sustained awareness campaigns. They spotlighted challenges Black female veterans faced systematically: employment discrimination, public harassment, medical care disparities, the recognition gap where their service contributions were chronically overlooked or actively dismissed. Cooper's case became the entry point for broader essential conversations about intersectional discrimination within both military and civilian institutional contexts. Cooper transitioned to full-time advocacy work, though she initially resisted that characterization. She spoke at veteran organization conferences, military service academies, and congressional oversight hearings. She consistently emphasized that her case succeeded because of circumstances most people lacked: comprehensive video evidence, an exemplary documented service record, Pentagon institutional involvement, federal prosecutorial resources. She reminded audiences that justice in her case represented the exception rather than the norm. Meaningful systemic change required functional accountability mechanisms for everyone, not only those whose cases achieved viral visibility. 3 years after the arrest, Cooper transitioned from active duty with the rank of Staff Sergeant, the promotion her commanders had recommended before the incident. She joined a veteran support organization focused specifically on women of color transitioning from military service. She mentored young Black women considering military careers, prepared them realistically for both the honor of service and the challenges they would inevitably face. Her case mattered substantively. But it mattered because it revealed how many cases did not matter. How many injustices required impossible evidentiary standards. How many people remained undefended despite clear merit.
If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Share this video with someone who would appreciate it, and let's keep building this community together. And before you go, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what stood out to you the most. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next.
True justice is an evolving process, and awareness remains your strongest shield. We appreciate your viewership and dedication to clarity.